to the first in a series of 5 videos to help you use Excel for the assignments in Math 502. In this first video, we will be exploring the very basics of Excel. When you open Excel, you will see a series of tabs at the top of the worksheet page. Each tab has a ribbon of functions that relates to that tab. The Home tab is the default ribbon that you will see. This ribbon is very familiar to what you see when you open a Microsoft Word document. There are options for font, centering and justification of print, as well as other options that we will discuss later as needed. The Layout ribbon is similar to what we are used to seeing in Word. If we need to insert a table in our Excel sheet, the Table tab is where we would go. We don't use that very often, but if you did want to put a table in there, you certainly could. Probably more useful to us, though, is the Chart tab. We will focus on the options given here in future videocasts. The Smart Art tab allows us to insert other graphics, such as lists, and relationship graphics, such as Venn diagrams. Later in this particular videocast, we will focus on the Formula tab and the ribbon options that you see there. This is one of the key features in Excel. It allows us the opportunity to insert and also to build formulas. The other very valuable tab that we will use is the Data tab. In this tab, you can see that you have the ability to sort data in either ascending or descending order. You have the ability to create a pivot table, which is not something you do in Math 502, but you will be doing this if you follow this course with a statistics class. An Excel worksheet consists of cells. Cells are where we enter our data. They are named by the column and by the row in which they appear. For example, when I click on the cell in the uppermost left corner, its position name is A1. If I click on a cell over here, its position would be D5. You can see that both the column and the row that it intersects are highlighted on the screen. When you begin to work in Excel, be sure that you can see the FX bar. It's in between the actual worksheet itself and the ribbon that's above it. If you can't see it, you can make it appear or disappear by going to the top of your workbook, and you'll see up there that there is an F of X tab. When you click this tab, it can hide that particular row or make it appear. You'll want to have it appear because what you're typing in the cell, you'll also be able to see up in this row. And sometimes it's easier to actually do your typing up here rather than to just be focused on the cell that you're typing the information in. For example, if I go up to cell A1 and type in exam, you'll see that both the word exam appears in the cell, but it also appears up here. So if I found that I had done a misspelling, sometimes it's easier to go up there, click, and replace what you need to directly in that cell. As soon as you press return, you'll pop down into the cell that's below the one that you were in. In this case, I've moved on to cell A2. Let's suppose I type a list of exam grades for my class into column A. I'm just going to type in some possible grades here at random. If I want to work with the grades in that list, I can activate what is referred to as a range. That is done by clicking on the top grade, left-clicking, and then dragging the cursor down so that all of the grades are highlighted. Now the list is activated. I can copy, sort, and use this range for all types of statistical analyses. Basically, there are 3 types of information that I can type into an Excel workbook. The first is text. An example of that is up here in A1, where I typed in the word exam. If I wish to enter more than one word in a cell, I need to decide how I want that to be displayed. Notice what happens when I add to Excel. Because my phrase no longer fits in the cell, it spills over into cells A, B, and a little bit into C. This can be confusing. I have a few choices. I can decrease the size of my font, but that could be hard to read. I can increase the width of that column by positioning my cursor between the columns A and B till I see a cross with arrows, and then clicking and pulling that cursor to the decided width. Or I can wrap my text. I'm going to move the cursor back to approximately where it was. To wrap my text, I need to activate the Home tab. And then you'll notice that about midway across that ribbon, you'll see the words Wrap Text. When I click on that, I have the option to wrap the text or to shrink the text to fit. Notice what happens when I shrink the text. It becomes very, very difficult to read. So I'm going to undo that. And now I'm going to wrap the text. When I do that, you notice that it makes the cell 2 rows wide. And actually, probably for most cases, looks the best. But again, it depends on your application, and you can decide what will work best for you. The second type of information that can be put into a cell is numeric. I did that when I put the actual exam grades into column A. Notice there are options right in the Home ribbon for changing my numeric text to money. I don't want that, so I'll undo it. Or percentage. But notice what happens when I click on the percent tab. It actually multiplies the value that is in the cell already by 100. Usually that's not what you're looking for. If I wanted to put these in as percentages, I could have either selected percentage for that column before I started, or I could have put in the exam grades as decimals and then turned them into a percent. I'm going to undo that as well for our purposes. I also can add decimal places by clicking the little blue left arrow. Notice that adds decimal places. Or I can decrease the number of decimal places, which is especially useful if you're rounding. And that's something that we'll talk about a little later on. The last data type that we will discuss in this video cast is how to enter a formula. If you want to enter a formula by hand, you should always enter an equal sign in the cell first. So I'm going to go down and click on cell A11. Then up in the FX row, I am going to enter an equal sign. This tells the Excel program that a formula is going to follow. For instance, suppose I want to multiply the number in cell A2 by the number in cell A3 and put that product result in cell A11. I've already moved the cursor to cell A11 and have put an equal sign into my F of X tab. Now I have 2 options at this point. I can type in the cell locations with the multiplication asterisk and then press enter. I'll show you that option first. So as I said, I want to multiply the value in A2 by the value in A3. So I actually typed the A2 asterisk A3 in the bar. When I press enter, the product will appear in cell A11, or again, entering my equal sign first, I can highlight the cells that I'm interested in working with my cursor, click on each one, and notice when I do that, it actually puts the position of that cell into the FX bar. Then when I type in the asterisk for multiplication and select A3, it automatically puts that into the bar as well. Now when I press enter, the same product appeared in cell A11. I'm going to delete that now and actually click off of the cells to unhighlight them. One thing to remember is that Excel follows order of operation, i.e. PEMDAS. When you type in a formula, it will deal with parentheses first, followed by exponents, then multiplication from left to right, and finally addition and subtraction for left to right. For instance, suppose I type this particular formula into cell C3. Excel will add the cell values from A3 plus A4 first because they're in parentheses. Then it will actually divide that sum by A5. When it has that answer, it will subtract that answer then from A6, so that order of operations has been followed, giving us an answer that you can see is carried out many places past the decimal point. And this would be a good cell to practice our rounding on if we wanted our answer, for instance, to be rounded to the nearest tenth. We could click on that right arrow until our answer was in the format that we were interested in showing. Let's move on to the formula ribbon for a bit. Suppose I wanted to add up the exam values that I have listed in preparation for finding the mean. I can do that